Well, oh my goodness. Well, wait, hold on. This way. I feel like the scarecrow. Yes, this you guys can read. The Lit RPG podcast. Our next segment is going to feature Ramon Mejia and there he is, and Raymond Johnson. A little R&R.
A little R&R for us. Well, thanks for coming, guys. We're gonna get out of your hair here, but then after you're done with your segment, we're gonna come back and we're gonna harass you and disagree with everything that you said. So be prepared for that.
So the next time I say you did, you're gonna disagree with me on that.
Yeah. Yes. There you go. His response is better than mine.
Hey, what's a better show? Me disagreeing with you or me agreeing with you?
Well, it depends on what we're talking about.
Yeah.
If I want a sandwich, agreeing with me is better. You know.
Oh yes.
All right.
Wait.
All right.
I want a sandwich.
I know.
Right.
Yeah, I want a sandwich now too.
I'm leaving.
Okay.
I'm leaving.
This is now the sandwich show.
Hey, you know what? I might just hang out with you guys while Jeff's making us a sandwich. I don't know if that's hey, Mixmaster Ramen.
Oh, there he goes.
Oh, he left.
Sorry. Yeah, I think they booted him out. I was like, oh, your time is now up. Hi, everybody. I'm here from the Liturgy Podcast. And with me here is Raymond Johnson from our sister podcast, the Liturgy Audiobook Podcast. Might show you logos for both, but I think I loaded one. But we're here hanging out on a segment for a sound booth called R&R. It can stand for Ramon and Ray, or relaxation and rest, or reviews and something else with an R. Anything you want.
I'm happy with all of them.
Yeah. So we went with R&R because I'm not original. So how you doing, man?
I'm good. I'm great. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. I know you work hard and you work late, and it's about 8:30 for you. It's a little earlier for me, but I'm happy to be able to talk to you and to hang out with you. And we're for the folks who are just watching, we're probably just going to chit chat for a tiniest bit before we get into the couple of reviews we have for an ebook for me and an audiobook for Ray. So feel free to hang out, drop some comments, and we'll talk about them. If you have any questions for us, feel free to ask them about anything we do. So we'll just do some chit chat right now. So Ray, how have you been, man?
I've been good. I've been busy. A lot of stuff happening lately in my life, just craziness. In fact, my wife is trying to buy a house right now. So I think I just texted you a little bit ago and said, well, if we get the house, I've got a whole building that'll be for my books and my writing and all that stuff. So I'll be able to have all my stuff up that I've been hoarding for years. So I'll have a cool background besides what you see back here now.
A special building for books and green screens. I like that.
Yeah.
We got in your house as well. Like, I got a special room just for the stuff because my wife was like, you should probably put that somewhere where nobody else can see it.
Yeah. Can I just say, we never get a chance to talk. We don't ever have like free time to just sit down and chit chat. So this is really nice to sit there and just converse with you. I'm not saying, hey, I've got an audio problem, or hey, what can I get this in? So thank you so much for taking the time to do this with me. I appreciate it.
No, I'm always happy to talk to you. I know we haven't actually spoken since we did auditions with you. Whereas like, that's probably the longest conversation we had.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Other than that, it's like you drop videos and you drop audio for me. I'm like, okay, I'll just take care of this and smush it together for a podcast. And it's like, okay, see you for the next show. Yep. But beyond you just getting I know you're doing a couple of fun projects in the game RPG community. I know you just had an audiobook come out. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. I didn't even know the audiobook was coming out, to be frank with you. It was a surprise. The publisher, it's Night Sky Anthology, just announced they had free codes they were giving out to people. And I was like, wait a minute, I didn't get a free code. And I helped write this book. And so I went and looked, and I'm like, yeah, here it is. And it's called Titan's Prophecies. And it is about it's really a book about kaiju. And I'm the one guy that said, I want to sneak in some MMORPG, lit RPG kind of stuff. But a lot of it had to get slipped out of there because it was too crunchy, and I had a 10,000 word limit. So it went from being like solid lit RPG to game lit, because it has stats and stuff like that. They talk about entering the game, but beyond that, there's not a whole lot. They wanted giant monsters fighting viciously. So That's what happened there.
No. That's their book. It's a short story collection of kaiju battle stories. So it's not specifically geared towards Litter Beat in the first place or Gamelit. So I understand their perspective of tightening it down. I am surprised though that they didn't talk to you about, oh, we're going to do an audiobook for this in addition to an ebook. I'm like, did you sign away those rights? I don't know if that was in your contract.
Yeah, well, see, I've done a lot of stuff with them in the past. Like we did Backyard Monsters and Postcards from Hell and that sort of thing, because I like horror and I enjoy writing short stories. And none of those books have ever gone to audio ever. So seeing that one come up, I was like, wait, there's the what? So I was a little flabbergasted at that point. So
yes, it seems like it's an odd thing for them to not communicate to you, but still, it's nice to have your work in an audiobook. And I have another short story with the Spider Monster for Shadow Alley Press with their Brooding It Online short stories collection. And I know that's actually expanded into a larger project. I think you shared the cover art, so it's okay to talk about. How's that project coming along?
Well, believe it or not, I wrote way too much. It was almost 200,000 words. And they're like,
I don't know if that's too much in our genre. I mean, I feel like that's about normal. Yeah.
Well, they were like, we need to break this up a little bit here. So we've gone back and we kind of split it. And right now I'm finishing book one. And it was really funny because there was a point where I had like the spider, she sneaks away from the rest of the group. And this is Shaklak, that's my spider. And she sneaks away from the rest of the group. And it was almost like, why did I have her do that? And then it was like, that's the perfect place to split up and explain why she leaves the group and leaves them behind. So I just had to kind of go back. And it's weird because I usually work from the start and work all the way through the middle and come to the end. And now I'm at the middle and I'm working backwards, So it was kind of just really weird thinking like that for a little while. But I've almost got it done. And so book two is really just going to be a couple little changes. I'll have to just explain like what happened preceding and pick up from there. And there's a couple little nuggets to keep it so it's got continuity with some of the changes. Other than that,
okay, so it sounds like your novel went from like 200,000 word novel to 100,000-ish novels essentially, and you're filling in gaps to make sure that the pacing and the arcs still hit continuity for like a beginning, a middle, and an end. Right. With those halves. Yeah. Right.
And my biggest concern is I just don't want it to feel like a slice of life book, which is where it kind of goes. I mean,
I don't know why you mind that, but I think there are plenty of people who love that kind of story. I don't know who they are. No, I personally enjoy sometimes just freely exploring a world. So I like it.
Yeah, I know. I'm too rigid. Everything I've read since I was a little kid it's self-contained. Right. There's a point to it, and that's where my brain goes. There's got to be a beginning, a middle, and an end. That's why you have trilogies and movies, and so on and so forth. And when I don't get that, I lose my mind. I need to.
So you're saying you don't plan to write 20 books in this series?
What I do is, depending on how it goes over, if it's well loved, great. I will write a trilogy and leave a door open for me to do further books in that series with this character or that character from the main story, because it's a group, and I try to keep it as a group dynamic. The spider is the lead, but there's other characters in there, and so I can use them as we go through, and you won't feel like, well, hell, he totally brought this other person in off the street, and I don't know where they came from. So that way I can kind of keep things going and keep it lively, and yet still maintain the self-contained story that I like.
Right, and your story. Tell us a little about your story, just the tiniest bit, so they know what you're talking about. You can whet their appetites a little bit for the project you're working on.
Okay, well, way back when, James Hunter very wisely decided he was going to open his world up to non-writers or other fans, basically, of which I was one. And I wrote a short story about a spider who gets sucked into the Shadowverse along with Grim Jack. She gets left behind, and then she is evolved into a shadow spider. And this is a continuation of that story. So you kind of see where it picks up a little bit later. She's gotten a little bit bigger, because before she was just a little teeny weeny little spider. Now she's about the size of a small pony. So she, and you totally get the point of view of the spider. There's no question of all. I've been really meticulous in trying to make sure that it stays true to if this was a spider thinking, how would she think? I've been really hard with that. I've got a kobold in there. I've got a horror fanatic like myself who is in the book, and he is the human traveler. And then there's another character. He's a Reese, So I've got a nice mix of monsters, and it goes through it. So it's not a horror story, but it totally is a part of Eldgard and the VGO universe. But I think it's one of those places you never look, because it's from the monster's point of view all the way through. So even the MC, not the MC, but the traveler Cushing, he is less like a traveler than any other traveler, because he wants to be a monster and he couldn't do it. So he kind of like works his way into the good graces of the monsters and does things for them. So
okay, that sounds like an interesting story. I loved the short story when I read it. I was like, this, anything in my review was like, this could have totally be a full-fledged novel. When I read it, I was like, this is a Monster Evolution story, but it's set in VGO, so you can still expand into the MMO experience and bring in like actual players, and it could be this great fun story. And I'm happy to see that it has become not one but two and possibly more at this point. And and so your comment about the horror character, I was like, oh, that kind of ties in a comment from in the notes there. Restophilia Reddy says, my wife is in love with Battlefield Surgeon to my horror and gore. She would like to know if you have any other recommendations for books like that. And I don't know. I think Battlefield Surgeon is like a unique thing in game narrating. Like it's definitely one of a kind in combining horror and kaiju, that's for sure.
Right.
But I know Justin Donovan Brooks has a few other horror stories that are dungeon themed that I always talk about around Halloween. What about you? Have any recommendations for that?
If I had to go for like the gory splatter punky kind of stuff, I would go with Matt Denman again with the Dominion of Blades. There's a nipple scene in there that just is as gross as you can get, where they're doing things. And forgive me, I had to say it.
Matt does like horror.
Yeah. And that was one of the scenes like in Kaiju Battlefield Surgeon. There's a scene where he's got to drink this milk. And I totally lived that scene out in real life one time. Not exactly, of course, but I really, I drank really spoiled milk unintentionally. I thought it was the food I was eating. I'm like, there's really something wrong with this food, and kept drinking this milk, and I got so sick. So when I read that, I was like, my body was reacting to that scene. I was like, this was so visceral. This is what I look for when I read horror, when I read gore. I want this kind of reaction. So it was real, and it was the milk scene of all things, not the mutilation.
For me, it was the thing with the testicles. Like, oh, that's okay. I'll just skip this. Okay, back to the story, and right. Like, oh, yeah.
But I think, like I say, Matt Denman is probably one of my favorite writers for that kind of stuff. So, and I can't really think of anybody else who does like kaiju sort of things. There is a kaiju story, but I wasn't a huge fan of the.
No, it wasn't that amazing. It's okay. Like you got the battles fighting monsters, I guess. So technically it works, but I was like, okay. I think maybe he's talking a little bit more about horror, perhaps. If you look up on our website at thelittlebeautypodcast.com under like our novel review section, they actually have a search bar there. If you type in horror, there are a few other choices. I know there are some that have like Cthulhu horror, or I know it's a Halloween. Around Halloween, we generally get most of our horror game kind of stories.
Right.
And there are a couple other titles in that section as well. If you want to go check that out.
Jonathan Brooks has the Core of Horror, the dungeon horror. Yeah, and that's really good. I had an issue with the narration. I did not think.
I never listened to the narration. I always do the ebooks.
See, she was a great narrator, and I think she would be fantastic in something else. But for horror, it just didn't fit, because it'd be like and I'm not saying this is exactly, I'm just giving you an example here. It'd be like my 6-year-old telling me a scary story. It could be the most scary story in the world, but coming from like a 6-year-old voice, I'm not buying the story at all. It just doesn't work for me.
I don't know. I could kind of see like that creepy horror voice. I mean, you think of Nightmare on Elm Street. The reason that song is so creepy because it's sung by children in like this weird, creepy tonal setting. So if you could work it right, I could see it working out potential. But I understand what you're saying, that it's not necessarily like the evil gore splatter voice you were expecting.
Right. Yeah, I wanted something a little bit more menacing and ominous as you go through it, and it didn't hit me that way. And like I said, she's a great narrator, but it just wasn't for me for that book. It did not work. And I hate to say that. I hate to put anybody's work down and say this, but like
he really does, guys. I got to tell you, we had so many conversations with the guy about, Matt, I don't want to really review this. I have negative things to say for really bad about this. I'm like, no, man, you're just being honest about a story you may or may not like. That's part of the job. Like, if you don't like something, you're doing a service to readers and listeners to say, these are the things I don't like. And it's not necessarily that you're intentionally trying to hurt anybody's feelings, but you also have a valid opinion, and you could be saving somebody money, or potentially the author or the audiobook listener or narrator like a bad review because a reader or listener got something that they weren't expecting.
Right. And I get that, but I still feel miserable about it. I mean, I've had a couple books where I've gone off. I'm sure you've seen the rants that I do periodically, but because I don't hold back when I really have an issue, and that's not an issue. But when I know the person's really good and I have to say something bad, man, it rips my heart out.
Yeah, but then you still give them like a 7.5. I'm like, wait a second. I think our review scores are different here somewhere.
Well, I got to be nice a little bit.
Yeah. On show notes, I think in our comments section, Matt Dinneman, M. Dinneman. He's actually watching as you're talking about him.
Oh, okay.
I think I saw him blush in the comments.
Oh, well, I'm a huge fan, so I'm glad he blushed.
Yeah. He's nice to talk to.
Yeah.
Okay. So, anything other projects you're working on besides those two things?
Nothing I can talk about. I do have other things that are tentative, and I've got a couple other things, other irons in the fire, but that will be for once I've got this one series done, and I'm working to finish the other and a couple other things. So it'll be another conversation later date.
Okay, hey, that's perfectly fine. I'm sure listeners and readers are just like, oh, now they just want more Ray Johnson stuff, and they're just going to have to wait for it.
Yes, indeed. Always leave them wanting.
Yes, that's what a comedy saying. I wish I was funny enough to make that sound funnier.
Yeah. Well, hey, I know we got to get to our reviews here, but let me just ask you real quick, because it's been driving me crazy. I totally loved your Mechanical Crafter book 1. I mean, I really, really loved it. It was fantastic. Genuinely, from the heart, I say that.
Thank you.
And I know that for you, it was a challenge that you accepted to write things not in present tense but past tense. How did you feel about that when you were done? Did you say I think this was okay, or was it a trial, a tribulation? What did you think?
It was just a different way to think about writing for me. And this is something that comes up in the forward of like book 1, and that I was challenged by a friend of mine, Blaze Corvin, to write something in past tense so he could try to read with something that I wrote, and I fulfilled the challenge for him, and it came out to do for the series. And just switching from first person present tense to first person past tense was just a change in mindset. It was just something I hadn't tried before, and it took a little while to try to work out the way my characters were speaking in my brain, or the way that the narration flowed, because actual speech is still in present tense, but everything else is in past tense. And so it just took practice, and my editors going, "This is not correct anymore, Ramon," and doing fixes. But after a while, it's just a different way of thinking again. But now if I ever go back to any of the other earlier series, I'm like, I got to switch back. I'm like, oh, okay, that'll be fun.
Yeah, right. So you were going to review Life Reset 5. So
I am. Let's start off with Life Reset 4, though, so we do them in chronological order.
Oh, that's on me.
Yeah. So you're up first, man. I have a picture for you for everybody watching.
Thank you. Well, I got to say, I enjoyed this a lot, and I was kind of shocked. The last book, to me, it felt like it was a little rushed and truncated, trying to get the story to fit in. I think he was going to end the series at that point. He wanted to say, "Here's how it all wraps up, nice and neatly." And I was very glad that Mr. Kuznets came back to this story. And I have to say, it kind of played out pretty much how I thought he would have to do it. With getting into the game and rebuilding and doing things. I said he's got to do this, and this, and he did. And it's not a ding, because it was only the most logical thing he could do. There were good little flips in the story, and I really enjoyed his child's how do I put it, arc in the story, and how things get, because I can't give away anything. I hate doing this where I can't give spoilers. If you want to talk to me after the show, anybody, just give me a ping and I'll tell you what I think. But there was a lot of really good things, good nuggets in it, and it leads into the next book quite nicely. I think it really, really ties up what probably should have been the last book here, because I think because he usually wrote, like, the first book was like 24 hours long for the written listening, and the last one was a lot shorter. So I think this was kind of like maybe how he could have just put those two books together and ended here for book 3.
He might have been doing what you were doing now, that he decided, oh, this is a good place to split it without going into like 200,000 or 300,000 words.
Right, and that could be the case. So again, like I say, this feels to me like the completion of book 3 more than a book 4, and again, not negative. It just really carries over the story really well, and it sets a lot of things up. I love the ending where he's finally getting himself established as a leader. So, and like I said, can't give spoilers, but yeah, it was really nice. I enjoyed it a lot. I mean, it's going to be like one of my higher scores, of course. And I got to say, Sound Booth did an excellent job. The sound effects, the music, everything. I didn't have any issues listening to it. I enjoyed it totally from start to finish. And I was like, that was a very smooth book. It was a very quick listen, even though it was, over 14 hours. So I enjoyed it a lot.
No, I absolutely agree. I only read the ebook version of this, so I can't speak to the narration quality. But the story itself felt very nice. I think I disagree with you a little bit in that I didn't feel that book 3 was necessarily rushed. It just felt like a natural conclusion. I know there were some points that were like, oh, he's really tying off these storylines to make sure that everything feels complete in case he doesn't continue on in the series. And I know I think I talked to Shimmer about this. I wasn't sure if he was going to continue at some point. I know he did some other projects in between book 3 and 4 at least. And so when book 4 came out, I enjoyed the switch because it very much became more of a larger scale view of the game world. It includes more town building. The book 4 and 5, I'm thinking this Dark Arc is going to have a lot more town building. There's a lot more realm versus realm kind of conflict between the monster empire and the human empire and all those other players in there. And so I definitely appreciated the expansion into that area. And a lot of readers were like really anxious for that type of gameplay to expand. And it definitely does in book 4 and in book 5, which we'll talk about a little bit. But in book 4 in particular, with that there is a lot of good progression in that respect, which I think readers really enjoy. And I also liked the introduction of that and the development arc of his daughter, which is something that comes up in book 3. So it's not like it's a spoiler for anybody who hasn't read any of these books. If you haven't read any of them, you don't have no idea what we're talking about anyway. So it's not a big deal. Like, go read these books anyways. They're always listed in Little RPG Podcast as 8, 7, 8 scores out of 10, and that they're good or great. I've always enjoyed all of them too.
Right. And I'm glad you did say it was his daughter, because I didn't want to give away that little tidbit. But
no,
I think she was one of my favorite characters, especially when she and he kind of had this little face off to prove like how good she is to go out to the fight. And he's like, well, if you can take this sash, we'll talk. And
yes.
that was a really good, in your face kind of battle between a father or something. It'd be like something I do with my kids. Only I just smash them in the face and say, "You're done."
You're like, you are too small now.
Yeah, exactly. SWAT. But it was a nice, and it was very touching. And again, I think that he just really, and I didn't want to say book 3 was less, but it just felt to me, like you said, he was tying up loose ends. And before, he would expand on a lot of stuff and take his time with it. And it was like he'd just get to this village, and then it was like, boom, I got the Minotaur, I'm out of here, I've got this. And it was like, wait, what happened? So that's where I was kind of like,
oh no, well that actually comes up in book 5. Like, there's a recall to that it's definitely meant to be a teaser, and it develops a lot more in book 5, and that there's that expansion stuff we're talking about, and that he's conquering other towns and to expand his monster empire, and that comes up again in book 5.
Okay. Like I said, it just felt very truncated to me in some spots, like he was just trying to tie stuff up, like you said. Mm-hmm. And I just said, well, man, I realized he's trying to conclude this, and I thought it was going to be a longer series. So when book 3 came out, and I thought, this is it. He's done with it. I was very sad. I even said the thing, I'm very sorry to hear this is the end of the book, but I'm glad he completed the story, and I appreciate that. I really appreciate when authors finish a story. I really do. So I just, like I said, it was very enjoyable. And like I say, SBT for me just really tore this place up. I mean, they burned down the house when they put this thing on. I mean, they really just did everything 100% right with this story. I just loved it. And of course, I can't listen to the story at all because for 2 weeks afterward, I go around saying shadow crap, because my wife is like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, you would never understand. So, it's just one of those things. I can't stop talking like that for a bit. So,
it's a good sign. I've always enjoyed some of the theaters raising the level of storytelling with their narration work. I for me particularly, I loved when Jeff Hayes cosplayed as the main character for the series. He actually cosplayed it for Dragon Con one time, full gear, green makeup everywhere, a staff, and he literally did the voice the entire day, much to the detriment of his dating career. He wanted a date like that, and he did not break character once during the date. And I was like, dude, I'm sure it's okay about it. She's not, she'll understand. He's like, no, it's art. I'm like, oh, okay, good luck with that. And so I love the dedication to their craft there. We'll move on to the review for Life Reset Book 5, Conquest, which is actually out now for you to enjoy. I don't know when they're going to do the audiobook narration for this, but I enjoyed the book immensely. We've already kind of talked about some of the points of like expanding town building, expanding realm versus realm of combat. I think that's also a big highlight of this particular book. And for this second story arc as well, in book 4, 5, and probably into 6, it seems like the big shift between just the main character story of getting out of the game to him trying to get out everybody else who happens to be trapped in the game now. And that particular storyline of like getting everybody out isn't as developed in book 5 as I was hoping it was going to be, but all the other stuff definitely is. Like there's a lot of time, there's a lot of resource gathering. There's a lot of fights between the humans and the monsters. And I always thought it was really done well. I think the daughter's arc here is still nice. She's used a little more as a threat to the main character, and that if she gets hurt, according to like his big promise to he loses, and she's used a little bit more as a consequence of that a little more than she had in the first in book 4, I would say. But still very entertaining, good combat, good fighting. I liked a few of the villains a little bit, and that there was definitely creepy. You get a return of some of the villains from book 4, which I thought was like, okay, that's a good character to come back with. But overall, it's just like another fun story. And I've never been disappointed with anything that's been done in the series. So this series is always, for me at least, always like an easy review. I can always like just sit back and not have to take notes and be like, I'm just going to enjoy this reading. And I think that's always a mark of a really good series.
Right. Absolutely.
Oh, and there we go.
We're too long.
I fucking disagree. It wasn't even a date. Are you kidding me?
It was a chance for you to have a really good time, and you still blew it.
I did have a good time.
Oh,
and,
yes.
I met her the next day. So
yeah, you could have gotten breakfast with her, man. Instead you could have gotten breakfast. I'm just saying.
I did not say it's art either.
Make her laugh. Make her breakfast.
It's art. I know you definitely said that. I mean, if it's just a memory now,
you weren't there.
So
you weren't there.
I'm just making the memory how I want it.
I was at the group. Like he literally had a group of people who were like rooting for him and trying to get him, to talk to somebody.
They did well. I did. Yeah. I did better than you guys make it out.
I don't recall that happening being the case.
No, because
we were getting real time streaming from the other guy in the date. He's like, oh man, Jeff is just searching for this bar from a car somewhere for some reason. He's just dragging us all over the place. Like she just wants to go back to her place. Why can't he let us go back to her place?
Well, I have a big surprise for everybody out there, because not only did Jeff do this really embarrassing, awesome thing, but there was someone there with a camera. That's right. We have live footage of Jeff. No, we actually don't. I'm sorry. I gotta say, I got your expectations up, but yeah.
We have
well, thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Ray. Thank you, Ramon, for a little R&R. I think we all needed that. I definitely did.
Thank you so much. One more thing, Ray. Because you said something about not even realizing that something else, one of your audio things was being made. What was that? Was it another Shadow Alley thing? Another?
No. It was. I do horror stories sometimes, and this was. It was Night Sky, and no, it wasn't Night Sky Anthology, but it was an offshoot of that. And it was just they did the book, and they wanted to just do kaiju, and they said these giant kaiju killing each other, and I just said I'm gonna game lit or get.
You got a little game lit in there.
Gotcha.
I had
to sneak a little in,
It makes me wonder if you weren't informed that we're doing Surviving Ludus as well.
What?
So another audiobook there. Apparently
not.
Although that makes more sense.
Already recorded.
Oh, wait.
And sound effect. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, all of Blaze's stuff
another
gets
audio
audiobook
surprise
treatments. So yeah,
for
that makes more sense though.
Ray Johnson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Little
Okay,
Ludus.
so who read my story, Jeff?
I did.
I got to get Justin in on some of them though at some point if I get any more your way.
Yeah, man.
We will.
Send me something.
We'll make it happen. We'll make it happen. All right.
No,
Thank you guys so
awesome.
much for coming.
Thanks for having us.
I'll get
Thank you for having us.
Yes.
Another massive round of applause for Ray.
Ray will get you